Hello everyone, I am Chandrabhan Singh and I take Modern World History, GS and both optional at Vajiram and Ravi. In this lecture, which is going to be a brief one, we are going to understand the nuances of Russian Revolution, why the Russian Revolution was a significant episode in not only European but global politics, because there's a famous saying that if the French Revolution unleashed a wave of revolutions in 19th century Europe, then the Bolshevik-led Russian Revolution, that is the second phase, it inaugurated a competition to win the hearts and minds of the people. So we will try to not get into the every aspect which we generally do in class, but I will tell you that how you should approach this topic. In fact, some of the questions which has been asked in GS paper 1 have been from Russian Revolution. And in what ways the understanding of Russian Revolution will help us to even understand the Indian politics of 1920s and henceforth. Some of the policies of Jawaharlal Nehru in post-independent India, especially the industrial policy or the creation of planning commission, was also incorporated from the policies of Lenin and Joseph Stalin. So if we break up this topic, then the topic can be broken up into three parts. One, the causes, long-term, immediate cause of the revolution. Second, the course of the revolution. And the next is the impact of the revolution on Russia, on European politics, and also on global politics. Now at Vajiram and Ravi, when we do history, when we do modern world history, we don't only follow an event-centric approach, which generally is about what all things happened or what the sequence of events were, what are the causative analysis, but we try to develop an ideological understanding also. For example, a main student who studies Russian Revolution must understand that how Leninism, though derived from Marxism, was different from it, and how Maoism and Leninism is different, how Jawaharlal Nehru, who was inspired by the political ideology and also some of the economic policies of Lenin, also differed with Lenin, and how and in what circumstances the Maoist ideology gave rise to Naxalism in post-independent India. So basically, if you understand this topic in total, then the application of this topic is no longer only limited to the GS paper 1, it has a broader paradigm. In fact, in classes we also discuss what were the Gandhian views on the rise of left. So everything is very much linked. So let us try to simplify it and have a brief and crisp understanding of this topic. So if we talk about Russian Revolution, the first thing you should understand and we should keep in mind that Russian Revolution is an example of twin revolutions. So there were basically two revolutions that happened in Russia. One, which is the February Revolution. Now some books also rightly mention the revolution as March Revolution because there is a month of gap between the Russian calendar and the European calendar, the rest of Europe. So February Revolution was a leaderless. Some also believe a spontaneous, unplanned revolution. However, the Bolsheviks claim that there was considerable political mobilization, ideological groundwork which was done by it. This is called as the political phase, which started impromptu, which started in the form of a women protest at Petrograd to be joined by the workers and the soldiers. And this revolution resulted in the overthrow of Romanov rule. And we see that the members of the parliament, that is Duma, they convinced Tsar Nicholas II. So at that time, the monarch was Tsar Nicholas II. So they convinced him to step down and none of the members of the royal family were ready to accept the position of the monarch because the situation was in a very case of a turmoil. So overall what happened, that the monarchical rule came to an end and a provisional government was formed. A temporary government was formed, and this provisional government was controlled by the Russian bourgeois. The responsibility of this government, until with elections, proper elections, a proper government is formed, was to manage the war. So one of the important decisions that had to be taken after the Russian Revolution is that what should be Russia's role in the war. So they decided that we had joined the war, we had started the war based on our own interests, so we will leave the war also based on our own calculations. So the decision was taken that we will continue the war. Although it should be kept in mind that the reason why, the immediate cause why the Russian Revolution happened was because of the economic difficulties and also because of the recurring defeats being faced by Russians during the World War I. Now, while the provisional government was formed at the central level, we find that in the towns and cities, municipal governments were formed. These governments were called as Soviet. Soviet word basically means council. Although Lenin had said that Soviet also means the people of Russia. So we often come across the term. So numerous such Soviets existed which were managed by the working class, workers, and the Russian soldiers. So committee based, and these municipal governments were under the influence of the political party of Mensheviks. And the Mensheviks even supported this. We will understand, and we have to understand what is the difference between Mensheviks and Bolsheviks. Now, one of the important decisions that was taken apart from continuing the war by this provisional government was to grant pardon to many of the political prisoners and also allow for the return of political exiles. So during the time of Lenin, many of the political leaders, during the time of Tsar Nicholas II, many of the political leaders like Lenin had been exiled. And when this February Revolution was happening, Lenin was in Switzerland. So basically, this major decision paved way for the return of Lenin. Lenin and his Bolshevik party was in disarray. It was in a very bad shape in the absence of its most influential leader. And Lenin had a very critical view of Russia's participation in World War I. Lenin had clearly said that this war is a war of colonial and industrial powers. So the reason why Germany and Britain are fighting, the reason why Germany and France are fighting is because of their material interests, which are overlapping and also contradicting. Whereas Russia is neither a colonial power nor it is an industrial power. It has yet to emerge as an industrial power. So he had said that the Russians should have not participated in the war. They should have instead channelized all their resources towards industrial development. And he had declared that if the Bolshevik party of Lenin, comes to power, then Russia will withdraw from the war at all costs. Now he returns and he criticized the decision of the provisional government to continue the war. Because of the continuance of the war, economic difficulties remained. Lenin started publishing his speeches, his writings in a collection known as April Thesis. And Lenin also strengthened his Bolshevik party and raised the Red Army with the help of Leon Trotsky. So this is one part where we understand that what happened in Russia or what was happening in Russia after the February Revolution. We also have to understand that what was the idea of revolution according to Lenin. Lenin, who was influenced by Marx's view of two-stage revolution, but he disagreed with the idea that the revolution should be leaderless. Marx had said that the proletariat revolution should be a leaderless, and there is no need of leadership because the masses, all the working class, the proletariat would themselves come together based on common class consciousness and based on common hostility towards capitalism, and by a violent revolution they will overthrow, and eventually we'll see communism will. But Lenin says that no revolution or mass movement can be leaderless. In fact, Lenin talks about that revolution must happen. He says that revolution should be led by what he calls as Vanguard Party, a party at the forefront, and this Vanguard Party would consist of committed and educated political elites. And this Vanguard Party would mobilize both peasants. So Marx had not mentioned anything about peasants. But Lenin says that no, in Russian economy, today the working class is hybrid. They are both peasants, and many of them are peasants who are part-time industrial workers. So they will mobilize both peasants and proletariat, and they would start a revolution. And this revolution will overthrow the bourgeois-led government on all forms of capitalism, and eventually this will give rise to a socialist state. A socialist state would be formed. So when it was asked from Lenin, what about communism? Because Marx talks about a stateless, classless society, but you are talking about a party, you are talking about a state. Marx does not talk about all this. So he said that communism in the future. Or possibly he said that there may not be a need for communism because of the positive policies, because of the welfarism of the socialist state. So we have to understand that what differentiates the Bolsheviks from the Mensheviks is that the Mensheviks strictly adhere to what Marx had said. The Menshevik party is not as disciplined, as closed as Bolshevik party. And what differentiates Maoism? So in class we do in much detail, but for now I am just explaining that what differentiates Maoism from Leninism is that Mao also agrees to the idea of two-stage revolution. Mao also said that in Russia, the first stage revolution happened in 1911 when the Qing dynasty was removed, and eventually when the Kuomintang party came to power. Lenin bhi kehte hain, Lenin also says that the first stage revolution was the February revolution, but now the second stage revolution will be the October revolution. The October Revolution, where actually we see that in the month of October, the Red Army, taking advantage of the frustration of the masses with the prevailing government, people had lost hope with the government because the government led by Prime Minister Alexander Kerensky was fighting with Kornilov. So they were fighting with each other. And even he had issued arrest warrant. The elections which had been promised when this provisional government was formed were not held in the last few months. So taking advantage of all this, and on the basis of strong party cadre, they were able to overthrow this. And this socialist state was formed, which will function on the principle of democratic centralism. Democratic centralism, democracy in the formation of the party, and centralism with respect to decision making, like a pyramidal approach. So first, this is the course of the revolution. If we talk about the long-term causes, then we have to go into the geography. We have to understand that why Russia could not benefit from enlightenment, could not be a part of the European trade network, why Russia was late into industrialization, and what happened after 1861 when Tsar Alexander II issued Emancipation Manifesto, abolished serfdom, and gradually Russian industrialization began. So basically, when we understand the Russian Revolution, we try to start from the long term, or maybe we just introduce the February Revolution and the course of the revolution, and then we go to the long-term causes. And after this, we have to understand that why the Russian Revolution is a significant episode, because the rise of a socialist party was seen as a threat by the West. We see that in European politics, till now democracy and capitalism existed. Now we see socialism and communism existed. And by the time the Second World War would be fought, we will understand that a third political ideological front that is Nazism and Fascism will emerge. That is why it is said that the Second World War was also fought on ideological grounds. If you talk about the influence of Russian Revolution in Indian politics, then we see the rise of left. We know that in 1920, the Comintern Communist International, at the 1920 Communist International, Abani Mukherjee, Hashrat Mohani, Shaukat Ali and others had formed the Communist Party of India. And later the ideas of these socialists and the tremendous success of the new economic policy of Lenin had influenced leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose. That is why we say that 1920s was the rise of left. We see various communist parties being formed in India. The role of communists in India and how Nehru, post his visit to Russia, was his belief in Russian form of economic development was further strengthened. So this topic has a lot of application if you talk about modern India also. What was the relation between Comintern and the communist politics in India? So this is how you should prepare this topic. Instead of only focusing on the events, that is important, we have to understand that what is the difference between Lenin and Mao. So again, as I was saying, that Mao, coming back to the where I left, Mao had said that in 1911, in Russia, in China also, the Qing dynasty was removed, 1911. So Maoism also is based on similar ideas. So Maoism had also, it talks about two-stage revolution. And he had said that the first revolution had happened in China in 1911 when the Qing dynasty. So again, this is something that we discuss separately in the history of China. And then the second revolution was during 1945 to 49 when the Kuomintang party of Chiang Kai-shek was defeated by the Chinese Communist Party of Mao. And what separates Maoism from Leninism is that Maoism is based on the idea of mobilization of peasants. As in Chinese economy or in China, industrialization was yet to emerge along the lines of the West. So this topic is very interesting. And then we understand that Soviet Union was formed. Last year before, in fact, last year before the Russia-Ukraine war, why was Putin critical of the policies of Lenin with respect to Ukraine? So when we understand the formation of Soviet Union, then we do understand the background to Cold War. And when we understand the Cold War, then we also get a view of the relations between Russia and the West, Russia and US. So how after the Cold War, the relation between Russia and the West has shaped up? What has been the role of NATO? So everything is very much linked. As they say, history is a study of continuity and change. So that is why I wanted to just briefly discuss how this topic of Russian Revolution can be applied at multiple locations. Thank you.